Okay, hey, entrepreneurs, Denise Klein here with KleinVirtual, and in the spotlight today, we have my friend and coach, Becky Stickley with Becky Stickley Coaching. So we're going to dive in and learn all about Becky and what she does, and she does it very well, in case anybody's wondering. Good morning, Becky. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
I'm so excited to have you and be able to share you and your beautiful brain with all these wonderful people in our group today. So, we're going to start off with our first question, which is always tell me a little bit about yourself and how you came to be an entrepreneur.
Sure. So, as you said, I'm Becky Stickley. I'm the owner of Becky Stickley Coaching. I provide leadership coaching and training to entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs. So, intrapreneurs are really where I came from. So, it's people who take kind of that resiliency and spirit and drive and mindset of an entrepreneur and apply it within an organization.
Mm.
And so I came to this because, I really didn't climb a career ladder as much as I played in a career jungle gym. And so I did a lot of wonderful things. I'm so excited for the opportunities that I was given throughout my career. I was a children's librarian. I worked as the assistant in an intellectual property law firm, and I spent the bulk of my career in a association, a police association. And that was great because I got to really flex that entrepreneurial spirit and do a lot of problem solving, do a lot of different things. It is associations are a type of nonprofit, so you wear a lot of different hats. Um, and how I came to coaching was as I grew in my career there, I became known as this person who could really do kind of anything. I set up their communications program, communications and marketing, and they received a grant to start a technical assistance program with 12 other organizations, partners. And it needed to get going within like a couple weeks. So they're like, we don't have time to hire someone, Becky. And I tell people about that time. Everyone was telling me that this was like the opportunity of a lifetime. Even as I got into it, everyone was like, you're doing great. And I'm over on the side, like crying in the bathroom. Like imposter syndrome does not even begin to describe how I was feeling. And I knew I needed some help. And that's, I'm a big podcast listener. And I was listening to a podcast during that time and heard this coach speak. And I was like, that's what I need.
Mhm.
So I hired my first coach. It got me through that time. That program is still up and running. I moved on to another role at the organization. And about a year later, I was talking with my husband, who's like, I think you would be a good coach. I'm like,
Mhm.
I think you might be right. So I went and got a coaching certification and used it internally to coach new managers, coach people who are going to be working remotely, and started to take some clients on the side.
Mhm.
And that's when I realized that my entrepreneurial spirit
Mhm.
might translate to entrepreneurship. And so I've been doing this on my own full time for about 2 years now.
That is amazing. And I love your story because I think there are a lot of us. I'm one of those that, I worked in the corporate world. I was also an educator, and it takes a lot, right, to move from being an employee to working on your own. But I love to, because I know you work with entrepreneurs, because you work with me and a lot of
Mhm.
other entrepreneurs that I know. But I love that you want to coach those entrepreneurs. And I'd never heard that term before until I heard you using it. And I would say that that is a title that really did apply to me. And so I love that you can help touch these people. They're so integral to their organizations and help coach them. And yes, you do have a gift for coaching. There's no
Thank you.
doubt about that. Um, can you tell me a little bit about the difference? Because you've coached both
Mhm.
intrapreneurs and entrepreneurs. Is there a different approach to coaching either of those?
For a long time, I was thinking, well, I had to choose one.
Hmm.
Needed to, niche down. And I realized that there's a lot of similarities.
Hmm.
Imposter syndrome creeps up for both sides. Um, Again, because of that entrepreneurial spirit, a lot of times I talk with both sides about things like selling, how to sell an idea versus an offer. There's so many similarities. I'll say the one big difference, and this is both good and bad, is you can kind of take it either way. Entrepreneurs often feel a sense of powerlessness
Mm,
that entrepreneurs don't always feel. Sometimes they do feel it in terms of the market or clients or things like that, but it's a little bit different in that they do still feel in charge. They feel in charge of their business. Entrepreneurs in other ways are like, well, I have a boss. Like, that's great, but I don't make the rules. And
right.
so there is a little bit of a different approach in kind of communication and beliefs around yourself when it comes to entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I think I just find that fascinating. And you're right. Could definitely see someone that is an entrepreneur saying, well, I've got these parameters I have to work within because it's not
Mhm.
my business. Where an entrepreneur is like, I have no parameters because I haven't decided what those parameters are. So there's challenges on both
Yeah.
sides of that. So you made that shift from being an entrepreneur yourself to an entrepreneur, and you took steps because you said you started with taking some folks on the side. How long was that transition for you?
It was about probably 8 months.
Yeah.
You know, I wasn't really pushing my business very much,
Mhm.
but people heard about what I was doing, and then thankfully, I got clients who then told 2 people who told 2 people.
Yeah.
And it really, I think I probably would have kept on that way for a while, except the job that I was in was more than a 40-hour week job.
Yeah.
So I was working a lot. And then because of that, I was coaching people in the evenings.
Mhm.
And so I was spending a lot of time in my office, and my husband, and at the time, 3, 4-year-old
Mhm.
daughter, we're living life.
Yeah.
And, I was thinking, the reason I'm doing this is, hey, I want to help people. And also I want to create a life. I don't want to sacrifice my life for these things that I love. It was a hard decision. I loved my job. I
Mhm.
loved the association. I still stay in touch with them. I still do, some work in that realm on the side every now and then. And I left on good terms. And I think that's another thing that
Mm,
I coach entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs on is you don't have to demonize something to let it go.
right.
And I think a lot of people have to get to a point where they just hate their job. And,
Mm,
I'm not going to say it was all sunshine and roses. There were some challenges,
sure.
but also I could love it and leave it.
Yeah.
And they told me like, that doesn't work out. Please come back. And, um, thankfully it is working out, and I do love it, but it really got to the point where I was just working so much. I knew I had to make a decision.
Yeah. And I think we each get to that point. My story.
Yeah.
So you know that I did exactly the same thing. And it does get to a tipping point. You're like, okay, either go all in
Yeah.
and hope that all my plans worked out. So yeah, it's a big shift, and obviously you're doing well, and I love watching you grow. So it's
Thank you.
wonderful. Let's talk a little bit about any obstacles or challenges. I mean, every entrepreneur, we have them. Sometimes it's a nasty email one day, or it can be
Mhm.
something bigger. So can you share a little bit about any obstacles or challenges you faced as you've been building?
So the most acute and probably, difficult to talk about obstacle is the day after I gave my notice
Mhm,
at my job.
mhm.
My dad was in a really horrific accident at work. And he was in the ICU for 3 months. He was on a ventilator for a month. And so, my transition out of my role was not what I had hoped. I really wanted to pass it over with white gloves. And I did in some ways. I was a pretty organized manager. And so things were in place. So that didn't necessarily look the way I thought. But then here I am transitioning to a role where I don't have benefits. I don't have leave.
Right.
I don't, if I'm not working, especially at that stage of my business, we get to different stages,
Yeah.
but at that stage of my business, if I wasn't working, I wasn't getting paid. I didn't have any passive income streams. I didn't have a team or anything like that. Um, and it was all new. I had made this leap. And so I didn't know, it was a struggle in that sense. It was also a struggle in that to be frank, I was making very good money in my old job.
Mhm.
And now I wasn't quite making what I had been making.
Yeah.
And it was hard to feel like I could ask for help.
Mm.
So when my dad got out of the ICU, so after those 3 months, he actually came and lived with us
Mhm.
and needed a lot of care. And I didn't see, in my old job, I was pretty high up.
Yeah.
I felt like if I was there, I could be like, oh, I will pay someone to come and sit with him. I will pay someone, I will ask for this help because I'm worth it and I've earned it.
Mhm.
And now I was in a very different identity and had a hard time asking for that. And it took me a while. It was definitely not perfect. um, but I did, and that really set me up, I think, for some other challenges that I've since had to deal with.
Mhm.
Not that it all looks similar, they look
Mhm.
very different, but it was that identity of seeing myself as a business owner
Mhm.
and not just someone who was making this much money or who had this many clients. Really seeing that this is a business that means a lot and is worth, obviously my dad is worth a lot. And
Of
that was also a conflict of like, well, shouldn't I be there all the time?
right.
But how I could care for him and kind of hold both of those things at the same time, that skill is definitely helping as I hold two things at the same time that look very different now.
Mhm.
um but that was definitely the biggest challenge I dealt with. And it was right off the bat.
Right. And either of those things, shifting from being an employee to self-employed or dealing with this huge health scare with your dad, either one of those things by themselves would have been challenging. And
Yeah,
you got to do both
I
at
did.
the same time, and so yeah, that helps put things into perspective, I would think. Okay, like I made it through that. Look at all the skills and things I learned about myself through that, and then apply those moving forward. Does
Yeah.
give you a little bit of perspective. And that I will say that's one of the things I feel like for me when anytime I've heard you speak or gotten to work with you is that perspective. And I know you talk about like, having people, right? Processes and perspective. I love that. And so having that perspective piece, that
Mm.
mindset piece is invaluable. And
Yeah. And I think it's important too that you don't have to do it perfectly. Like just because like I look back and I'm like, oh goodness, all these things I could have done differently.
Mhm.
I take it with me. It doesn't mean that, I'll never be successful. There were times when I thought that during
Oh
that
yeah.
time period.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
But,
I've done the
you
same thing.
don't have to do it perfectly.
No, and there's no such thing as perfect.
No.
Learn that too. Like just let go of that. I've joked with people. I'm an entrepreneur 25 years in the making, and
Mhm.
perfectionism had really kept me out of it. It's like, well, because I have to think about everything, right? I
Yeah.
have to anticipate everything because I don't want to. I want to be successful, right? I don't want to fail. So you think you got to figure everything out so everything can be perfect. No, that'll just keep you from actually taking any action. Messy action is the name of the game, at least
Absolutely.
for me. Okay, so your business is up, you're running, your things are going great, you're speaking all over the place, and we'll be able to talk about some opportunities for people to come spend some time with you too at the end. Can you talk a little bit about what success looks like for you? You mentioned your family. I'm sure that plays some part in that for you.
It does. I think it's definitely morphed even in just the 2 years that I've been doing this. And I'm sure it will continue to
Mhm,
evolve, but
mhm,
it really is twofold. And I think sometimes, I'm hesitant to say this. I think some people take it the wrong way, but there is some monetary success
of
that I'd
course.
like to have. I want to be a contributing member of our family in that sense. I think there's a lot of ways
Mhm,
people can contribute, and I
mhm,
think they're all good. They're all, what is important to you. And for me, that is an important part of being able to contribute so that we can go on family vacations, so we can have some of the things that we want to have, and that we can also give back to the community in ways that we have maybe done in the past and maybe then some. There's a lot of great causes that we want to give to or give more than we do now.
right.
And so the financial piece is definitely one piece of the success. The one that's evolved even more though is what it looks like in terms of time for my family and mine's perspective.
Yeah.
Um, I was, not only was I working all the time, but even when I wasn't working, I was like always going, I need to get back to this person. I need to not forget this. And having a job where, I can love my clients so much, and I do, and I think about them all the time.
Mhm.
I also can turn off now so much more easily. And so that success of elevating my family a little, to be honest, I wouldn't say they were an afterthought. I have an amazing husband. I love my daughter so much. She's like the coolest kid. Um, but they were one piece, and now they've really, I've elevated them. I can turn off, I can set my schedule so that I can run down to the end of the driveway and get Helen off the bus every day.
Yeah.
And that is important to me. Again, I think that will evolve as she grows up,
Mhm.
as my husband and I's relationship changes,
Mhm.
but letting them have a bigger role where
Yeah.
I can really be present. And then, like I said, also that kind of financial piece. And then the third is, and I don't have a definition for this yet,
Mhm.
but is the number of people I'm able to reach
Mhm.
and help.
Yeah.
Testimonials are great when you're a business person.
Of
And
course.
I love being able to share those. But like getting the ones that just bring tears to my eyes, like
Mhm.
I didn't do that. They always had that ability within them, but I was able to say things in a way or give them a tool in such a way that they were able to uncover that. Like I don't have a metric for that. I maybe will at one point, I always set goals and that sort of thing, but
Yeah.
success is really sharing my voice so people can share theirs.
Yeah.
So yeah, kind of a
Yeah.
threefold success approach.
And you get me with that because, of course, you've been my coach before. And one of the things that moved me working with you is that, I don't know, you have this innate ability to listen and really hear somebody in a way. Because I would say something and you said this. I'm like, I did. Oh, I did say that. You have this beautiful way of hearing and then being able to reflect back. And so you can see yourself in a different way. And that is one of the best. And I've worked with some coaches. I've worked with different kinds of coaches. And that is something I feel like you have a strength beyond other coaches that I've talked to. And
Thank you so much.
that ability to reflect and yeah, give that person a different perspective of themselves.
Mhm.
That's huge because we can't see ourselves, right? So
Right.
being able to have that reflected, I'm like, I didn't realize I was saying it that way, and how
Mhm.
much that's affecting my mindset. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, I love
It's
that.
not things we were taught in school for some
It,
reason.
for some reason, exactly. No, we're definitely not. So we've talked a little bit about what success looks like and going through challenges. What are some ways that you maintain your motivation and stay focused when challenges happen? Because life is lifey and gets
Mhm.
a little crazy sometimes. So how do you maintain your motivation?
So some of it is thinking of what I would tell my clients.
Mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm.
am like my own worst client.
Yeah, coach
Um,
yourself.
sometimes. And part of that would be is like, what am I focused on right now? Like that specificity and getting clear can be really helpful because I am a snowballer.
Mm-hmm.
Something goes wrong, and my husband will tell you this. I'm bringing up things from high school. Like
Yeah,
I'm just this person who I always do, and I don't do it to other people, but I am
we do it
very
to
quick to do
ourselves.
it to myself
Yeah.
of like, I did this thing wrong or this didn't go as I had expected. And now see, that's how it always happened.
Mhm.
So I've noticed when I see that red flag come up is to get really clear and specific. Like, okay, no, 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 no. Instead of snowballing with this huge overgeneralization, what is it? Because then it becomes either a problem I can solve or something that maybe I need to pray about or something I need to let go of or something I need to like bring to a friend or
Yeah.
we don't have coworkers. Some of us don't have coworkers
No,
anymore.
exactly.
Um, but to a trusted confidant to be like, okay, I realized this was happening and I don't know how to solve for this.
Yeah.
What can I do? So that specificity is hugely important because usually it brings it down about 20 notches. It doesn't make it go away. It
No.
doesn't make it okay necessarily, but it
Mhm.
brings it down and makes it something that can be solved for. Um, shameless plug a little bit, but having a coach, having
Mhm.
someone who's not necessarily a friend
Mhm.
that will tell it like it is and also has tools and can care for you and be like, okay, here's what I'm seeing.
Mhm.
You know, I can't tell you how many times I like report something like it's the news, and my coach is like, okay, so you realize that that's like how you're thinking about that? I'm like, no, 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 no.
That-
It's how it is. So having, and that could be a friend, for some of
Yes.
us. I think having people who fill these different roles,
Mhm.
my husband is my biggest supporter
Yeah.
till the end of time. And that is amazing. And that sometimes means he's a
He's not
um,
objective. Yeah.
yeah, not subject, he got an end goal there.
Yeah.
So, but I need that. I need
Mhm.
that support. So also like knowing people who kind of build that support scaffolding
Yes.
around you. It's
Mhm.
not one person that you're leaning on. You have
Yes.
different people, different entrepreneurs, different other managers. If you're an entrepreneur, they don't even need to work with you.
A
Sometimes it's nice if
mentor.
they work
Yeah,
somewhere else.
exactly.
Um, Having that support scaffolding and knowing who you can go to in different places and knowing when you're the person
Mhm.
you need to lean on yourself and kind
Yes.
of having that. So I think my big thing is building that support structure around
Yeah,
you.
and I think that is really important, and I didn't realize when I started my business how important that is, and, obviously, we're friends, and you've been my coach before, but having those people that, can give you some objectivity when you
Mhm.
can't, and having that sounding board, and I'm gonna do another little shameless plug for you, because one of the things that I do to help maintain my motivation comes from something I heard you say that stuck in my brain. And that's, what am I making this mean?
Yeah.
Because something happens and then we go through that thought cycle. And if y'all don't know
Mhm.
what the thought cycle is, Becky will teach you all about it. But you really do. Something happens and we start creating some meaning out of, oh, well, now I'm this, or this means I'm a failure. And if we can just take some of that out of it and say, okay, this is a thing that happened.
Yes.
We don't have to catastrophize, which is where my brain tends
Oh
to
yeah.
go. So yeah, maintaining that motivation by saying, okay, what am I making this mean?
Mhm.
And is that the truth? That really helped me. So
Yeah.
everybody have that conversation with Becky. It's a good one. It's a really good one. As you've been building, what kind of strategies or resources have you found helpful as you scale and grow your business over time?
So, I plugged in pretty early on to the local chamber of commerce.
Mhm.
And I think that that's very dependent on your business, and
Yeah.
your business model. But I think it's done a couple things. A, it has helped me grow my business.
Mhm.
It also has plugged me into other business owners and entrepreneurs for that
Mhm.
support scaffolding. And I think that, again, that could look very different. So for me, it was the chamber and has since evolved into other networking groups.
Mhm.
I think finding those groups that work for you. And
Yeah.
I think you can realize that if you go with your gut, I think you can know pretty early on, because there's so many, which is
Mhm.
amazing.
It is.
I think regardless of where you live, there's probably either online or in person, but finding those places to plug in,
Mhm.
um, and get inspiration. I mean, I can tell you there's been times where I've just been having a day,
Mhm.
and we all have them and it's okay. And then I go to an event and I come back and I'm like, yeah, I've got these ideas. I'm
There you go.
excited.
Yeah.
Um, and not just relying on yourself, for that motivation. So I think networking groups slash chambers, something like that. Um, there's been other things. And again, finding what resonates, I know Denise, you're one of these too. Like, there's so many resources out there. I'm always like, let me download that guide. Let me
Yes.
download this guide. Let me pay 22.99 for this thing. Um,
Yes. Yes.
so I think having some discernment and figuring out like what my goal is for maybe the month. It doesn't have to be my big goal, but like what's my goal for the month and only focusing on the things,
Mhm.
the resources that maybe help and cutting myself off at some point. A lot of the resources I use are kind of coach specific.
Mhm.
Um, through the place I got my certification or other similar coaches. But I think again, knowing what works, you don't have to take it all. I think if anything that can really derail you.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, probably long roundabout answer. I'm not sure if
No,
that's
but
what.
no, that's exactly it. And I love this because one of the things, like you and I both, as we're not dependent on any particular area. We happen
Mhm.
to live in the Shenandoah
Yep.
Valley, but you could coach anybody anywhere, and just like I can work with anybody anywhere. And yet you and I both have kind of taken this local approach where we're connecting into our community and creating relationships and stuff there to build our business. Not that we won't get more online business, but I think in this day and age where you think everything's on social media and everything is online, um, creating those relationships, like you said, through your local chambers and then other local things. I don't think people should overlook that. You know, one of the things that we need to do as business owners is to build that know, like, and trust factor with people. And that happens so much faster when you can look someone eye to eye and have
Yeah.
a conversation with them. And so I think it's invaluable to have that. And obviously to build that structure around yourself, that support structure
Yeah.
locally is a fast way to do that.
Which can also look like support services, and I
Yes.
think one of the things you're creating with the hub too that's been so great, and I've plugged into some of those is,
Good.
when you need the virtual assistant help, like, hey,
Mhm.
I know I can go to you now. Like, when
Yes.
I needed some help on a pretty specific project that I had a deadline on, I
Mhm.
knew exactly who to go to with you and that you would be able to provide that
Mhm.
support, bookkeeping,
Mhm.
video editing, or like there's different things, and the more you can kind of plug in ahead of time,
Mhm.
um so that you're not waiting till there's a crisis. It's like, oh my gosh, I need to find someone to help me now. I mean, I kind of maybe did that once, but but ahead of time. So I think that's the other benefit of networking or being in
Yes,
groups like yours, where you can get to know these people ahead of time.
absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, as we get ready to wind down, let's talk a little bit about for people that are maybe entrepreneurs that are thinking maybe they'd like to try out being an entrepreneur. Is there a piece of advice or tips that you would give someone that's considering making that switch?
Sure. I think, there's a couple things. One, I love the concept of a minimum viable product. It kind of comes from the tech industry. And if you're not, you can Google it. We don't have to spend a whole bunch of time, but it's what it sounds like, the minimum version of what you want to create and do and get it out into the world quickly so you can start getting feedback and iterating. And I think that is really great for when you want to go into entrepreneurship.
Mhm.
What is that thing? Like, what's the smallest version? I think sometimes we think we have to do this huge investment.
Yes.
And again, depending on your industry,
Mhm.
you might have to, there might be a larger investment. But no matter what it is, there is a minimum viable product version.
Mhm.
Getting that smaller version out and start getting feedback on it so that it reduces the risk a little bit and helps you start iterating to get better. I think the other is there's so many resources out there.
Mhm.
Depending on where you live, there's small business development centers all over the country that provide
Absolutely.
free assistance.
Huge.
Um, Again, depending on your industry, there's grants available, there's micro loans, there's all of those things. So I think really see what's available to you in terms of those kinds of resources. Talk to someone who's doing it. I think the big, all of that. And then there's the mindset piece. Like, those are all kind of the literal pieces, but I think the mindset's intertwined in that, we think we have to do it perfectly before we can put it out there,
Agreed.
where
Mhm.
the minimum viable product kind of conflicts with that.
Yeah.
And where are you going? Like, where do you want to go? You don't have to know the exact how, but
Mhm.
it's nice to know, like, approximate. I mean, I'll tell you, in 2 years my business looks nothing like I thought it was going to.
Same.
um
Exactly.
and that's okay, but I know that I'm going somewhere. Like, I
Yes.
have an idea. Sometimes it might veer, but I'm not just like aimlessly wandering.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think knowing what resources are available, getting that minimum viable product, and getting some help around your mindset are
Mhm.
big keys.
Uh, Fantastic. And I don't think there's any better advice. That's exactly what I would say too. So, well, let's look ahead a little bit. Do you have goals or aspirations for the future of business, and how you plan on continue growing?
Absolutely. So one thing that I did not anticipate in my business that has grown over the couple 2 years is speaking
Mhm.
at events, and I love doing that. The first event that I spoke at, we talked about obstacles. I didn't mention this one, but I totally bombed the first time I spoke at an event. It was awful. But I didn't let that. I did for a little while. I was like, maybe this was just not what I was meant for.
Mhm.
But then I looked at how I got there. I mean, I I spun myself into such a tizzy before this thing. It is no wonder it went poorly.
Yeah.
Um, I would like to speak more at
Mm.
more events. I really enjoy it. I
But you're
love,
also very good at it.
thank
Anybody
you.
hasn't heard her is what really good.
I love being able to touch more people, honestly, with even just little tidbits. The other thing I'm excited to do is I just launched my first group program. So again, being able to help more people and create a container where people can help each other too. I love one-on-one coaching. I'm still going to do it. And I think also sometimes having that place where you're not just hearing from me, but you're
Mhm.
hearing from other peers in other industries, can really maximize the growth that you get. So excited for that, and to see where that kind of goes next.
Yeah, and I agree. I've done coaching where it's one-on-one, and I've
Mhm.
done coaching in group settings. And I think there's a place for both. But
Yeah.
you're right, in that group setting, number one, you realize you're not alone. Whatever is going on is just that alone is huge. But you really do, you get just as much, I think, from the other participants as you do from the coach. So it's almost like having multiple coaches in one. So I love that model, and I love that that's going to give you a chance to serve more people
Yeah.
too. So let's talk about, how can we support you? Is there anybody in particular you would like to be connected with, or how people can work with you?
Sure. So as I mentioned, I work with people one-on-one. So, if you have a friend or you are an entrepreneur, that is typically where those one-on-one clients are. And then the other is my Intrapreneur Incubator, which is the new group program. So I would love, if you are in HR or have a cohort of managers or are a manager, um, so many people are struggling. So many people are feeling overwhelmed and burned out. We're asking people to do more with less. Clients and customers and bosses and employees are all
Mhm.
expectations are all over the place. And so this entrepreneur incubator really will help you manage that through, as you mentioned, people, processes, and perspective.
Mhm.
So yeah, I would love to talk to anyone who's kind of in those spaces that is interested in coming along and learning a new way of working.
And I'm going to assume, because we haven't really talked about this a whole lot, but you're not industry specific either for that
Mm-mm.
entrepreneur. So, I mean, I'm sure whether it's somebody that's working nonprofit, maybe,
Yep.
I mean, that's still, a corporate thing. They're still trying to do those
Yes.
things. So it
Yeah.
doesn't.
So I will say, most of my clients tend to be in kind of a more office type
Mhm.
environment, but I do, I have worked with people. So I did a in-person version of this that was just one day. This is going to look a little different, but I did it last year and I had people from kind of the government sector. I had nonprofits who are a little more client facing,
Mhm.
service provision,
Mhm.
but it all, again, how we do one thing is how we do anything. And so again, sometimes hearing from people who are one step or multiple steps removed
Mhm.
helps you to see yourself a little bit better. So I think it's going to be great to bring together people from all different
Oh,
industries.
I love that. I love that. Okay. And so, our last question is, do you have any events or anything that people could come see you speak or
Yes. So
you?
depending on when you are watching this,
Mhm.
I will be speaking at the Shenandoah County Chamber of Commerce Women's Leadership Symposium on November 17th.
I'll put a link
Um,
for that below. It's in our group, but I'll put it on our post
Thank
for this
you.
too.
Yes. So I'm excited to be there for that. And then, as I mentioned, you can come join us for the Entrepreneur Incubator. We actually kick off in January,
Mhm.
but registration's open now. We're going to keep the cohort pretty small just so that everybody gets that interaction. So now is the time to register. Or if you have any questions, you can visit my website,
Mhm.
BeckyStickleyCoaching.com, and I'll answer all your questions.
Very nice. And everybody, I will put all the links to all the things so you can stalk Becky after this. Thank you so much for coming and sharing you and your beautiful work with everybody today. You're one of my favorites, you know that. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
coming, spending some time with us
Same.
today.